Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. And today's video is a little bit different because rather than talking to those of you who are struggling with binge eating, I'm here today to talk to your family or your partners or your friends. So this video is for anybody who has somebody very close to them who's struggling with binge eating and they want to support them, they don't know how to support them, perhaps you feel like you're always saying the wrong thing and upsetting your person even more. So if you're struggling with binge eating, you might want to check out this video and see if you want to show it to those close to you, if you think it might be helpful. And for the rest of you who are the people who have people in their lives who are struggling, I want to share with you 5 things that you need to know if you are somebody trying to support someone who is struggling with binge eating. So let's begin. And the first thing I want you to know is that you can't fix this. I know you want to help your person. The whole reason you're watching this video is probably because you want to help your person. But the problem is when you believe you can help them, you end up in this position where you're giving advice. So you're like, why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? Or have you tried this? Or, but surely if you just remember this. And what happens is when we're giving advice to someone, we're kind of coming in from a one-up position. And that can feel really quite shaming for the person who's in it. So you may be wanting to jump into the practical, like how do we fix this problem? And they may be trying to talk to you and just tell you how much they're in pain. And when somebody is in pain and their emotions are up, that is really the wrong time to be trying to talk about practicalities or logistics or what they may or may not be able to do. It will feel like, for your person, it will feel like you're just not listening to them and you're not taking them seriously. But you're coming from a place where you're just trying to help. So you often find like 2 people are just clashing against each other and missing each other. You feel like they're just not trying or they're not listening to you, or it might feel to you that they're in like a victim mentality place. But what it is in that moment, the emotions are up, they're in distress. And when we're in distress and people are trying to give advice to us, and no matter how good your advice is, it's probably something they already know or they've thought about at some point. So that can feel a little bit patronizing as well. So although I know you want to help, please try to move away from telling your person what they should be doing to get better. Unless you've been through it yourself, and even if you have been through it yourself, everybody's very different. So avoid that at all costs. Which brings me nicely on to point number 2, is to understand that you cannot understand. Unless you have been there yourself and felt that feeling, it's not a rational problem. And by not a rational problem, I mean that it doesn't seem to make sense. I can remember like feeling full up with food, like almost uncomfortably full, and yet still really feeling like I hadn't eaten. And it sounds like that shouldn't matter because we should just be able to tell ourselves it's okay, we've had enough food, we don't need to keep eating. But if we feel something really strongly, it doesn't matter what our rational minds might be telling us. This is something that is so powerful, and binge eating has the capacity to override someone's conscious control. And because eating is so linked with survival, in that moment when someone is experiencing an urge to binge, it can genuinely feel like life or death. It doesn't matter if they told themselves earlier that they weren't going to do it. It doesn't matter if they've made promises to you about what they're going to do. In that moment, it just doesn't matter. And I know this is really hard to understand if you haven't been there, but it is like feeling like you've just been taken over by something. So even though you can't understand, one thing you can do is that if you accept that you can't understand the depths of it, but just accept that it's there, that will really validate your person's experience and feel a lot more like they can trust you and they can talk to you. Because if you're not going to rush into giving advice, and if you're not going to try and make out like you know what it's like when they know you don't know what it's like, you're going to find the communication is probably going to be a lot better. And point number 3 I want to make is that binge eating thrives on secrecy and isolation. Now that can be quite tough for you because you may feel pushed out, like your person doesn't feel able to talk to you about what's going on. But it brings up such feelings of guilt and shame that quite often they may not be being able to talk to you about it, but they may not even be able to think about it themselves. So it's not necessarily that you are being deliberately shut out. It's just this is such a painful subject, and so many people I know, like, this is going on in secret. So the people that they live with, the people closest to them, don't know when it's happening. And some people are more comfortable talking about it afterwards, and other people, they just can't bear it. And even for me as a therapist, people coming in and talking about this and knowing it's confidential, knowing that I'm not going to judge them and I don't have an agenda, it's still hard for them to bring in and talk about their eating. So it's actually even harder for them to talk to the people closest to them about it. So that can be quite a tricky one for you to navigate if you're feeling shut out. Or it can be that it seems that it's not as bad as it is. The people I meet anyway who struggle with binge eating, this takes over their lives so much. They're thinking about it constantly. And you don't know what's going on in your person's mind. And if you're willing to go in non-judgmentally and ask, it at least gives them the option of talking about it. But I think it's important for you to respect that maybe sometimes they don't want to talk about it. And that's not about not trusting you, and it's not about shutting you out. It's just that they are feeling so bad about themselves that they can't bear the thought of talking about it to you, because there's that fear that you're going to think badly of them in the way that they're thinking about themselves. We all have this tendency of imagining that other people are going to see things in a similar way. So I suppose the point I want to make about this part is not to take it personally if they don't feel able to talk about it, but to somehow communicate your willingness that they can, and that you're not going to judge them, you're not going to try and fix it. And then the fourth thing, because if you've taken on board the first three things that I've said, that person is going to be much more likely to be able to talk to you and be honest with you about what's going on. So this is where you can step in a bit. And that is like, what might be the practical ways that you can help? Now, this is not about the giving advice that I mentioned in point number 1. This is more about asking, posing it as a question, saying to your person, like, is there anything I can actually do that will make this a little bit easier for you? I had someone posted on Instagram on one of my feeds, and they said that they'd finally been able to talk to their partner about it, and they'd come to this agreement that he was going to keep his crisps and chocolate in his car, so then he's got it available when he wants it, but it doesn't feel as dangerous and risky as it did for her to have it in the house. So I thought that was really lovely, because I thought it really showed this willingness to kind of say, like, okay, I'm going to try and compromise with you. I'm willing to do things for you, or to try and make our environment more supporting, but that needs to come from a conversation, as in what's going to help. And even in as much, I've worked with people who found it quite difficult when their partner is being very strict with their eating. Perhaps you're someone who wants to lose weight. Perhaps you're someone who's quite regimented about how you eat. And just being sensitive to that could be quite triggering for somebody who's struggling with binge eating. But that doesn't mean that you should have to change everything about how you eat, because you get to make your own decisions about it as well. But is there anything practical in terms of how your home is set up? We're talking about, like, if this is someone you live with, whereby you could support them in what they're struggling with when it comes to binge eating. And then the fifth thing I think that's really important to remember is don't underestimate the benefit of getting professional help. Binge eating disorder is more common than bulimia and anorexia as an eating disorder, but it's also a scale. So there are people who struggle with binge eating, who it takes over their lives from time to time, who just don't identify as having an eating disorder. So you might think, well, okay, or your partner or person might tell you that they're struggling with binge eating, and you wouldn't necessarily think that the place to get help would be an eating disorder organisation. But most countries have national charities for eating disorders, and they will work with, or at least know of, places where you can go to get help with all manner of eating distress. It doesn't just have to be the main eating disorders. You don't even have to think of it as an eating disorder to be able to get sort of specialist help from people who know about how to work with eating problems. So in the UK, our national eating disorder charity, the biggest one is one called Beat. And if you have someone who's struggling, you might want to give them a call and just say, look, this is what's going on. This is where I live. What are my options? Do you know of any support groups in the area? Do you know where I could go and get support for them if they want it? Now, you might not know if your partner wants professional help, but you might just want to know where the places are that's available if one day they come to you and they're distressed and they want to get help. And in terms of getting outside help, think of getting some for yourself. Again, this is going to be a bit of a scale to how much this is impacting your life, that this person is struggling with this. And it can be really hard, as I was just talking about how you can't fix this, but you want to be able to help them, and you're limited in what you can do to bring about change. I think your role is to offer the support and the non-judgment, and there may be times when people are much more in that thinking mindset where they want to talk about practicalities, and other times where they just want to have their emotions heard, which can be quite tricky because sometimes it just doesn't feel like you're doing enough, and you've got your emotions to look after as well. And I would still encourage you to, if you are being emotionally impacted by what your person is going through, is to tell them. Like, this is not to put it as a blame, and this is not to try and make them feel bad about it. But I think it's important that if you're asking them to be open about how they're feeling about what's going on, and you want to know what's going on for them, then it really needs to work the other way around as well, that they need to understand what's going on for you. So it would just be like, when I see you struggling with this, this is how I'm feeling about it. It's not, you make me feel this, and if only you would do this, then I would feel okay. But actually, in a relationship where the communication is good and the care for each other is good, I think to try and bring some balance, like for both sides to be able to hold the other's emotions about it. Or you may not feel particularly emotional about it, and that's fine as well. You know, this idea that communication is key, and really being able to accept that you can't understand this. And I know that that's frustrating because you're seeing somebody do something that seems very self-sabotaging, that seems to be really harming them, maybe harming your relationship. So it's really hard to understand why they can't just stop doing it. And you can't understand why they can't stop doing it. But if you can just accept that this is their experience, they will feel much more supported, much more held, and it will help them to feel less shame about it if you are kind of modelling that. If you're frustrated and annoyed and like, what's wrong with you? That is just going to drive their self-esteem further and further down. Because trust me, they already feel pretty crappy about what's going on. So, to all the partners, families and friends out there, thank you for being in the lives of these people, and I'm just going to leave it there. I'll leave this with you, and have a good day, and I might not see you on the next video because this might be the only one of mine you actually watch. Anyway, take care. Bye.